I'm Brendan Milstein, co-founder and president of Carbon Lighthouse. Thank you for joining us today. Today, we're going to talk about using data and AI to stop climate change. I think you'll be excited for 3 reasons. First, it's the right thing to do if you happen to want the species to have a planet to live on. Second, and the more salient business reason for this particular conference, is that there are $7 trillion per year spent on fossil fuels. And who is getting that money is going to entirely change over the next 10 years. And lastly, the technical problems are just fascinating. We need to use modern algorithms to send physical control signals through control systems that were built in the 10s and the 1920s. Some of these don't even use electricity. They use compressed air to move valves and change damper positions. It's marvelous engineering. Let's dive in. But first, a pop quiz. Here's a picture of a city. Where do you think the emissions are coming from? Think about it. What percent of emissions is coming from what part of this picture? Well, I'll give you a hint. It's not the people, or at least directly. The CO2 people exhale contributes to way less than 1% of global CO2 emissions. Now, you might be thinking it's the cars, or maybe the trucks. That's not a bad guess. Cars and trucks, actually all transportation, so planes, trains, ships, cars, trucking, all of it, that's responsible for about 30% of emissions in the US and a little bit less globally. The largest contributor to CO2 emissions in the US and the world is the buildings. In the US, commercial and industrial buildings and residential buildings are responsible for 70% of emissions. Globally, that number is about 60%. That is why Carbon Lighthouse makes it profitable for commercial and industrial building owners to decarbonize their portfolios. And we've been doing pretty well at it. Over the past 10 years, we've grown revenue a little faster than Moore's Law and eliminated the emissions of 18 power plants by helping landlords decarbonize their buildings. Now, before you get too excited, by the way we track power plants, there are 49,982 left to go to stop climate change, but we'll get there just a little bit before it's too late if we keep doubling every year. So how do we do it? So glad you asked. Let's dive in. First, the theory, and then a tangible example. It all starts with data. Data that is constantly streaming into our cloud platform from the 100 million plus square feet of real estate we already have in the platform. And when a new client signs a portfolio with us, we mail sensor kits to them and start new data streaming from their buildings as well. And all of this data is processed by our Clues AI platform. Now, there's 2 outputs that Clues provides. The first are bankable financials. This means a savings prediction in a dollar amount that you can finance. In other words, if savings are less than expected, Carbon Lighthouse writes a check to cover the difference. This is a big deal, and AI and Clues have let us provide pretty accurate predictions. Over the past decade, we've had to refund about 1% of revenue to missed guarantees. And the second output from the software is where the impact comes from technically. And this is very detailed scopes of work that a facilities team can implement themselves or put in RFPs for their contractors. Now, this is not just recommendations, not, hey, turn off your chiller at night. No, this is much more detailed and much more actionable. And what's exciting about this is that it allows us to bridge the gap between the digital and physical divide. Namely, the first set of actions is, hey, make these changes to your control system, add these control points to these valves on these 37 air handlers, change this valve, add the wiring this way. And it's not major changes. That's the exciting thing. Don't think replacing the windows. Don't think cranes and boilers. This is mostly making the existing equipment slightly better. And then once that's done, we can start the continuous optimization. And we'll get into what that means in a moment, because that's where 80% of the savings come from. The end result is exciting. It makes a lot of money for clients. It saves a lot of time. It's very actionable, so it results in real CO2 savings, which is the point of the whole company. And more recently, it allows us to improve IAQ, or indoor air quality. So because we are enabling control systems in buildings to better change how air flows throughout the building, we can make sure that air is healthy. So the control systems now can take constant measurements of particulate matter and CO2, volatile organic compounds, and change how the air in the building flows in response to these. So when the air quality becomes unhealthy, the system can make physical changes to make sure that fresh air is inside the buildings. And of course, all of this is run on top of AWS, which we'll get into in a moment. But first, a tangible example. What you're looking at here is a line drawing of one of the buildings we worked with on Miracle Mile, so close to downtown Los Angeles. Now, this building is a 400,000 square foot office building, and it was LEED Gold before we started working with it, which means it was already efficient. And this building is heated and cooled very similarly to how most office and industrial and retail buildings in the US are heated and cooled. Namely, there's an air handler, and an air handler has a big fan and a coil of water. And when you want to cool a space, you blow air across the coil of water that's cool. And when you want to heat a space, you blow air across a coil of water that's hot. Each air handler is piped to chillers and boilers in the basement, which provide the cool and hot water. And in turn, the chillers are piped to cooling towers on the roof so it can expel heat from the building. Now, what Carbon Lighthouse did was send sensor kits to the building so the control system can take in a huge amount more data, as well as update the brains in the control system. And this lets us do ongoing optimization. So in other words, right now, this building's control system is taking in data. There's an air handler on the north and south side of each floor. So from all 70 air handlers in the building, plus the chillers and boilers and cooling towers. And the control system is sending out little signals. Things that say, hey, right now, turn the fans in these 37 air handlers up, which has a penalty, but that'll let us turn these 2 pumps down. And net, that saves 25% of the energy use. And then 10 minutes later, the system makes a new automatic adjustment. It's this constant slight tweaking and tuning to gain maximum performance out of the building. And this is a big deal. We are able to save $200,000 a year in energy costs here, which is about 25% of the total energy spend of the building. And more importantly, the way buildings are bought and sold, that $200,000 a year becomes worth a significant amount of money. Buildings are traded like stocks. All the profit on a building gets a 10x or 20x multiple on it. So that $200,000, when the landlord sells this building, turns into $3.5 million. Now, unsurprisingly, this landlord took us to additional buildings, as most of our clients do. And across our clients' entire portfolios, to date, we have increased the value of the buildings by $250 million. This is significant. Now, in just these 2 buildings shown on those slides, the CO2 emission savings are great. We've eliminated the emissions equivalent to driving 18 million miles. It's not too bad. And across the total portfolio, 18 power plants. Now, landlords and us are not the only people who are paying attention to this $7 trillion number. This probably caught your attention a moment ago, and it's caught the attention of the entire capital markets as well. Biden has a $1 trillion plus infrastructure plan, which includes many parts of a Green New Deal. Additionally, the largest investors in the world are now starting to pay attention to where this money is going. The New York Pension Fund, which is a $226 billion fund, is divesting from fossil fuels entirely over the next 5 years. By 2040, they have committed to selling shares in all companies that meaningfully contribute to climate change. And the other major private sector investors are right behind them. Blackstone, Goldman Sachs, BlackRock, all of these firms now use the moniker of ESG, environmental, social, and governance, to guide how they are making investments and to make sure that they don't make investments in companies that are about to lose $7 trillion. This is an exciting time, and Amazon is helping us power it. EC2 runs all our servers. So when we need to run tens of thousands of simulations of buildings in 2 minutes, EC2 lets us spin up hundreds of servers and do that. RDS is a relational database system, and it stores the metadata for all of the sites in our platform. Now, metadata is the data that doesn't change, or at least change frequently in buildings. The address, the square footage, how many boilers the building has, that type of thing. S3 is where we store all of our time series data, the raw data that comes from our sensors. And lastly, DynamoDB gives us lightning fast retrieval of time series data, as well as bulletproof reliability. And these 4 parts give us the technical building blocks that enable the vast scalability of the business. To date, Carbon Lighthouse has eliminated the emissions of 18 power plants. The pandemic forced us to become yet more scalable. And instead of needing to send engineers to site to install sensors, we can now mail sensor kits to the existing facilities teams in those buildings. By combining the power of the people already in those buildings with the power of data and AI and infinitely scalable systems, we have been able to eliminate more emissions in the first quarter of 2021 than we did in all of 2020. It's an exciting time for the planet and an exciting time for engineering. Thank you for your time.